Can we have our next question, please, from Kenny Adegbola, from, I think is a student here. Or maybe not, I don't know. Hello?
Hi. My question is, what lessons has Hackney learned from the 2011 riots?
Tunde. Did everybody hear that one okay? What lessons has Hackney learned from the 2011 riots?
The honest answer is only time will tell. Because I think it'd be premature to say that the issues which were the catalyst for the riots have been resolved. There have been positive steps to address those issues, such as schemes targeted for young people, and looking at other concerns people have, such as housing. But we're not necessarily going to know until an incident occurs again. Hopefully it won't, because we'll then have to look at what the reaction was, because in many instances, the response to the riots, in fact, inflamed it, from my opinion. Okay. I think it's too early to say.
When you say the response, can you be a bit more specific about that?
So, the initial response to the riots, as many of you know, started from the protest outside the police station.
I can't have, impromptu interventions from the group. Let the fella finish, and then we'll.
I hadn't finished yet.
Yeah. And we got the others to go as well. So.
But the response was there are a number of people protesting outside a police station, and unfortunately the police didn't handle it, which they accept in the best way. This led to people being involved in criminal activity. The response from politicians wasn't to contain the situation, which then led to it escalating in other boroughs. So it's not an issue specific to Hackney, it was an issue that was specific to London and in fact nationally, because you had riots in Manchester, Birmingham and across the whole country.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, as a head teacher in the borough, young people, what do you think has...
Well, I think young people are largely responsible, they're politically aware, and they make good decisions. There are some that feel alienated, but in terms of the riots, what I learned, it was a small minority of Hackney young people. They weren't all young.
That's right.
Okay. But any sense of what the borough might have learned in a general way from what happened?
Well, in terms of, let's look at these particular groups of people and the incidents that sparked it off. It just didn't come from nowhere. And I think we all have responsibilities in making sure that ours is a cohesive community, whether you are a member of the police force or you're in education or you're a resident in the borough.
Okay, I'm going to ask Robbie now, as a relatively new resident of... do you have a perspective on what happened? And
I mean, at the time I was living in Dalston, and it was a shock. I guess my kind of perspective is that all of this is about making sure that that there were clear underlying factors that had been kind of going on for a long time that led to people feeling alienated and disengaged. And I guess that we just need to make sure that those factors may change over time. There are other factors that lead to people feeling disengaged and alienated.
Okay.
And actually gentrification may could be a fuel for that in the future. So I would kind of flip it back to now and say, well, let's make sure that we don't kind of create a new situation where young people feel excluded in their community.
Okay, well, one very strong memory I have of that sort of first night, apart from sort of watching it as a sort of slightly bemused spectator, but also the following day going into Clarence Road, right next to Clapton Square and Pembury Estate, and there was a sort of pack of journalists there, and a lot of local people, and just overhearing what other people were saying, and recurring themes from residents were, what's the Olympics done for us? Nothing has changed. This borough's getting posher, but it's not done us or our young people any good. Jules? Is that what you heard as well?
Well, I think, well, you've taken the question off on a not different direction, but a parallel kind of question in a way for me. Because actually that's something that could be said any time, you know. It was a year before the Olympics. Yes. Actually, you can still say the same now. Because actually, for a lot of people, the Olympics won't have had any impact. And to whom I will say, what were you expecting it to do for you?
I should say that, you know, we had the park and
but I think a lot of people had unrealistic expectations, which if anyone was really bored enough to go back and do a forensic look at what both the council or I personally and other people engaged in it ever said, it was never promising that every person in the borough, or even every 10th person in the borough, was somehow going to have a richer, wealthier life or a new job. But as I say, when you've kind of reshaped a whole area and there's sort of, like, say, the media centres that will employ 7,500 people in an area where negligible numbers of people, you know, the handful of car breakers' yards that were in that part of Hackney Wick were not employing local people and offering them a great new future, but they were polluting the River Lee. Okay. But as I say, if you've got something creating 7,500 jobs, well, actually, if that's not an opportunity, well then I don't know what is. What I would say is, I mean, what lessons has Hackney learned? I could give a long, worthy answer, but actually I'd almost like to deliver a provocative answer and actually say not much if it's new and headline. Because it's a very complicated issue. As I said at the time, it was a very specific myriad, just as Tunde said, myriad different things that led up to that. And it was different reasons in different areas. Hackney itself had no fires in buildings, whereas we saw plenty of that up and down the country. There was about a dozen or so burnt out cars with the extent of the criminal damage, and about 10 shops had windows broken, that kind of thing. Compared to other areas of the country, it was far of a different scale. Cheryl's absolutely right. Very few young people from our schools are involved. A lot of them were in their 20s, very diverse ethnic range of people involved. So if you kind of distill out all those kind of distractions, take out the fact, you know, a lot of people were from out of the borough. They heard, oh, it was a good place to go and have a ruck, and people were piling in later throughout the hours. Anecdotal stories of people overhearing people on the train the other side of London discussing that they were on their way to Hackney for the fight they could see brewing on the TV. If you distill out all those distractions and the people who jumped on the bandwagon, you come back to the cohort of people we were discussing earlier that actually should be our concern. Okay. The people who were disengaged, particularly, as I say, the older ones who were failed by a 1990s education system. The only other issue that I will say, if I'm going to pick out one particular thing, and that was the issue about stop and search. And that is, if someone said, well, what actually specifically changed? There is now a lot less stop and search that goes on in this borough than happened before then, and that's directly as a result of community-based meetings between the police, the council, and both groups of adults and groups of young people to try and make it more targeted on people likely to deserve being stopped and searched rather than on ethnic profiling.
Thanks very much. Do you want to just address the question? Not
really
talking about
briefly,
the council, but perhaps more, you know, sort of in a general sense about the communities of the whole borough. Small ask there.
I think it's already been mentioned that the causes of the riots were it's a whole confluence of different factors: inequality, alienation, gender, consumerism, unemployment, underemployment, cuts to youth services. So you had all of these factors coming together, and these things do have a long fuse. And I would agree with Jules that I mean, some of these factors, if you took it, cuts to youth services, have actually gotten worse, I would say, since then, and
but
possibly.
But not in Hackney.
But not in Hackney, okay.
Okay.
Well, we can. Some of my youth worker friends might question that, but anyway, we'll come to that. But I think that the key thing is, especially if you have really worked post-riots at this notion of social cohesion, as I said before, the problem that we're seeing, or the challenge that we're seeing with the demographic changes in Hackney, is a sense still that some of the young people who may not have been involved in the riots, but are increasingly, though, feeling excluded, feeling worried about being displaced, not just like being physically displaced, decanted from Hackney because they can't afford to live here or because they're evicted, or because they just don't feel they belong anymore. And that sense of exclusion isn't going to help this discourse around social cohesion and could feed into something in the future as well.
Thank you. Can we go back to our questioner, Kenny? What did you think of those answers?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mainly agree with Mr. Pipe. But I would say that we haven't really learned much from these riots. But if there was one thing that we've learned is that we should listen to the younger generation a bit more, because they do have a voice, and a lot of us have something good to say.
Okay.
Really quickly.
Excellent. Hold on. Did you just want to come back on that?
Well, I think the question of voice is just so important, and because all of the studies that are done on violence and urban violence, civil unrest, this kind of thing, show that a lot of this is an expression of voice when there's not another channel. If you would exclude young people from mainstream political channels, then they're going to find another way to express themselves.
Okay, do we have any quick comments from the floor? Hand up there. Just there.
Just very quickly, I had the same feeling that not much is learned, from the responses I got this, and plus 2 years ago, I think police around Hackney, they made a huge purchase of tasers, and so it looks like maybe there are less stop and search now, but there's more tasers, and the GLA also bought lots of water cannons, so
yeah.
I think really not much is
not the right response in your view. Okay, and we had one other hand. That'll be the last comment on this.
I was just wondering why, just after the riots, a lot of money was invested in Hackney. I think the lead for it was the Mayor's Fund. A lot of it just went into private development projects like the Fashion Hub, and I wondered if any of it went into the estates as well.
Okay. Anybody want to very quickly respond to that?
The thing is that's what the money was given for. It wasn't a case of here is some money from the GLA from a particular fund and just say, Hackney, do something nice for the community with it. It was a case of there was a specific project already to go on to do with regenerating the area, getting greater footfall and people coming in, and the GLA said, we want to help you fund that. And that's how that came about.
Okay.
And some of the money, though, did go on, as was the project was always intended, on say, like new shop fronts. So Clarence Road, which often gets cited somewhat unfairly, I think, as the epicentre of where things kicked off, that had all its shop fronts done out of that same fund. But that was always kind of in the pipeline. We just had this ready to go on the shelf. And the GLA said, actually, because of the riots, we would like to put some money into that.
Bad Boris. Okay.
That was one of the good things.
We have 11 minutes left. We have 2 questions to ask, so we're going to whiz through those.